Hello, hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Gaming Careers Podcast. Media in gaming has always been an important aspect of the industry. It helps expand the overall market by introducing new people to the various gaming genres and serves to connect groups with like interests. Today, we are talking to Lorien Green, the creator of the documentary Going Cardboard, about how to use media as a career outlet and build your brand. Lorien, thank you so much for being with me on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
It's a pleasure. So, can you help calibrate our audience and let us know who you are in and around the gaming space?
Sure. So I, back in my college years, was just a big fangirl of a particular MMO, which was Asheron's Call. So I
Yes.
started as a gamer. I was actually a marine biology major, so I did not go anywhere near that. But I was basically temping and adminning, and I was really into this video game. And it turned out the company that developed it was kind of local to me. So I had created my own little group in the game and a fan page and so forth. And over the course of about 4 years, I started pestering this company to hire me. And it did take a while, but eventually there was a community manager position that opened up, and the fruits of my labor paid off. Basically, I wore them down, and I got in there, and I was at Turbine Entertainment for about 4 years. And from there, I went on to do other marketing and inbound and social things. But that's really how I got into the game space from a professional side.
So
It
let's
was
slow
a
that
cool
down just a little bit because
Yeah.
pestering a company for 4 years, how do you even do that? So, like, you're just looking for, you're stalking people at nightclubs, or you're sending like mad emails, or like, how does one do that? Because if you were stalking them for 4 years plus 4 years at the place, your initial career launch was an 8-year adventure.
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah, sure. So, it's various levels of stock throughout that time frame. It basically started out, I was attending their player luncheons that they would hold. They have these little mini conventions. Back then, that there weren't a whole lot of big, gaming conventions on the East Coast or really anywhere else in America. So they would have these little conventions where their fans could come, and I would come, and I was just stars in my eyes, dazzled with the devs. I'm like, oh my God, I'm sitting at the same lunch table as people who made this game. And like I said, I'd made a fan site too. So at some point during that, I just, was looking on their website, and I emailed their HR person, and I was like, oh, I'd love to work there. I'm really passionate about the game and everything you guys are doing. And basically she responded back and had said, well, we're a little concerned about the distance, because at that time I had moved and I was about, 50 miles away from this company. So well-founded concern, that doesn't always work out. So I went on to do other jobs and basically got more qualified in skills that would be valuable to them. Because I had started out as just an admin, my next job was in internet marketing. And in general, community management for most companies sits within the marketing department. So I think that really helped. And then things developed. They were doing a sequel to their game. I was supporting that with a second fan website. And, making friends and networking basically, at these player gatherings. Like I said, I made friends with some of the devs. I was giving them input, silly things like, recipes for in-game food that they were actually making and like putting into the game, which was like the coolest thing in the world to me at the time.
That is awesome.
But, it's about strengthening those relationships over the course of that time. So it wasn't necessarily that I set out, oh, I'm eventually going to get a job here and work them down until they say yes. But everything I was doing was sort of contributing to that goal. And then when the community management role came along, it was a pretty easy in at that point. So I gave them my resume, and it really didn't take much to, get in at that point. But you may not, when you first start courting the video game industry, be qualified. And the important thing is to kind of keep developing your skills, I think.
Right.
So that worked for me anyway.
Well, and this is a story that we hear a lot on the show. There wasn't this magical resume. Everybody's looking for the secret sauce. And in fact, that's part of what the Gaming Careers Podcast is about. How do we find the secret sauce? And it's elusive. Most of the time, it's not a secret. It's just go and start building those relationships.
Absolutely. And one thing you have to keep in mind is a gaming company is a company like any other company. They have regular company departments. They have regular company roles. So it doesn't mean you have to be a game designer to get into the video game industry. There are so many other ways that you can be in that industry. And I will say, I had the opportunity to code quests. Like, they were very open to that. I actually did code, I think, 3 quests that went into Asheron's Call 2 towards the end. So, and I decided that coding was definitely not for me because it was really difficult. I was like,
Right.
that's not my forte. But the opportunities are there once you break in. So if you can break in on a different skill set, it doesn't mean you'll never be a designer. It's about getting your foot in the door.
Right. And there is kind of like this magical part of the in crowd. You have the card carrying, I'm part of the industry. And then to a degree, I want to qualify this, there's a little bit less of, well, what do you do? It's like, well, I can do a lot, but as long as you're on the other side of the fence, it's kind of this strange catch-22 that we've discussed on the show before. So tell me a little bit more about those fan sites that you made. What kind of traffic did you get there, and what sort of activities were you doing on your fan site that contributed to the Turbine turning its attention towards you?
Well, so keep in mind, this was early days of MMOs. Like this was like EverQuest days, like back then. So there wasn't
Sure.
a whole lot of really sophisticated stuff going on because it was all really a new genre. So I've always been just like a huge fan of cooking in video games. I don't know why. But I really like it. So I created this persona of this chef in the game, and I created this catering company, and they had little inventory baskets that you could put, it would hold a certain number of slots. So I started doing this gift baskets thing, and I like took over this town to be like my town, and I had like their logo of the windmills, in my logo. And I basically created this fictional catering thing on the server that I was on, and I do deliveries, run out these little baskets with like, rabbit pie and stuff like in it, and somebody could request it to give as a gift to somebody else. So it was basically a virtual catering thing. And then it started to spill over to other servers. And then we started like running like role playing, like Halloween events, like we had costume contests and stuff. And we told spooky stories and did like a haunted tour of like, these random towns, and just like a whole lot of imagination and role playing type stuff. So that was the first thing that I was known for. For the sequel, I basically did a parody website of sort of Discovery Channel, which was called the Dareth Conservancy. And I basically mocked like Crocodile Hunter. Like I had articles that were like that, like they are mangly to read, but if you read them, you can't help but basically be reading them in this Australian accent. And they were all about the creatures like in the game. And the stuff's still up. You can go to cragstonefarms.com and the website's there. And if you go to Cragstone Farms, or no, I think it's Dareth Conservancy /Cragstone Farms, because I think we kept the second one, but we also kept the legacy of Cragstone Farms. I mean, I'll provide you that. But and if you see the website, you'll laugh because it's like as non-sophisticated as they get. It was straight HTML. This was before HTML5. There was no Flash. The animation, such as it was on there, was GIFs. But it was enough, right? Like it was enough to show them that as far as community management, I basically created and managed my own community in those senses, like with the catering thing. So, that definitely proved to them that I could do it, on a larger scale.
That's fascinating. And one of the things
fun.
that we have a discussion about on the show is that back in the day it was like this, and so some of the challenge for our current listeners is, okay, well, how do I do that now? Well, I mean, time is this thing that continues, right? So, and the technology is growing so fast. So in the video game industry, virtual reality sort of interaction, augmented reality sort of interaction, I kind of have my finger on the pulse of that. There's a lot going on there. That technology doesn't live around yet as far as a supporting cast or fan base. In the tabletop industry, the kind of renaissance that's happening right now is actually bolstering the industry so that there is an application of broader professions rather than just designing, indie publishing, and those are your only two options. There is starting to become this infrastructure. So listeners, you could be telling those stories, 5-10 years from now of way back when I just did this thing and that's how I got involved. So it's pretty exciting.
It is, and you're absolutely right. I mean, that's how fast technology is moving right now. Like literally, for example, when I graduated college, there was no social media, and now I'm a social media manager. That didn't exist. It's not that I chose not to take those courses. There were no courses. And even now, like it's very hard for colleges to keep up with the way technology is advancing and actually support that with curriculum. So it's actually really important to go out there and, study stuff that, really excites you, the cutting edge stuff, and teach yourself. And it's so easy to teach yourself stuff. Like I was on Coursera taking a gamification course. There are so many resources out there. I mean, my 9-year-old daughter has watched a bunch of those YouTube like speed paint things. She can
Right.
do things on Paint and Photoshop now that I don't even know how she's doing. Like
Because you're just going to like blink out of existence in like the video version, and the lighting is going to change,
I know
and
the
the
background's
background
totally different.
is going to
I
be totally different.
teleport. It's what I do. It's how I get all this done.
That's right. All right, I am live. I have video. I have enhanced on so that I don't look like I have hail damage, which is fantastic.
Hail damage.
Well, I'm very freckled.
Oh, yeah, you definitely can't tell.
Well,
Be
that's
proud of your
because
freckles.
I should be. My wife says that too. Look here.
Sure.
That's what I
Wives say
normally look
that.
like. Can you see? Oh, I just changed it. Hold on. That's original. That is all of me in my Polish pride right there. It's all of the.
Still good.
Oh, you're so sweet. Still switching it back. Vanity. There we go.
Oh, that opera singing comes in handy.
It does. Sorry, you have microphone, head, ear. Okay, so silence for a little bit, and then magic cue you.
Yeah, so my daughter, for example, has been watching a lot of those little YouTube, speed paints where they go into paint and they have like, dubstep music going on in the background, and like they rapidly like put something really awesome together in paint. And through that and no other instruction whatsoever, she's able to do stuff in paint now, and she's moved on to Photoshop actually at age 9. That I don't even know how she's doing. Like she's manipulating shapes and stuff, and it's all because of the YouTube stuff. So there's a lot you can learn on your own in this day and age, and I definitely advocate like pursuing that, because that's how you'll get the specialized skills that how you were saying like there is no magic resume. That's absolutely true, and in fact you don't want some magic resume, because then everybody would do it. You want something that differentiates you, and that's why, like, especially with inbound marketing, like I drink the Kool-Aid, but it's all about creating your own personal brand. But that's key. I mean, you have to do something in the day and age that sets you apart, because and really like the things they teach you, like human workplace is a place you guys might want to look at. They're very adamant about the fact that getting a resume to HR doesn't really do anything for you anymore, because you're in a pile of like 100 other resumes. You have to do it other ways. So and learning things on your own is a good way to do that.
And what's awesome about the information age, which is where we are, is that all PhD programs and cutting edge technology is available for free. I have 2 master's degrees. None of the information that I learned in those degrees can't be found for free on thousands of websites. So that is not a barrier to you actually learning how to acquire those skills. And I've also been a hiring manager for a number of years, and when it comes down to it, I don't really care about the degree. I care about, have you done something in the discipline that I care about? And that's where kind of the portfolio pulls into everything. So let's fast forward a little bit and kind of talk about who you are now in your quote unquote, who are you in the real life?
Oh yeah, so I do social media. I'm still in that career. That's definitely the right career for me, because I've just, partly because I'm an introvert, believe it or not. Like, so I communicate. Are you too? Yeah, you know what I mean.
I'm absolutely an introvert.
So much better in quiet, like typing. Like that's the ironic part about social media. It lets introverts be social in a way that they weren't able to do before. So it's a really good field for me. So that's what I do, paired with what they call now inbound marketing, which is kind of just the holistic approach. SEO, like having a solid blog strategy so that you can get found. And social media, obviously, and just how all those pieces work together is what inbound marketing is basically. But social media, and blogging is a really important, dual strategy for anyone. So you were speaking about indie people and how they go about marketing themselves. Luckily, both of those things are free, but they're only free in terms of, you don't have to necessarily pay for them. it's a lot of work. You do have to be prepared to put in the time. So
Right, right. And I'm looking forward to jumping in. We're going to get all of the Lorien Green hot tips on how to be absolutely famous online and how to be viral at the drop of a hat. That's my expectation for this show.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
I'll see if I can live up to that.
Let's both hold our breath and let's see how that goes. So let's let's jump into Going Cardboard, your documentary. So how did that come about? That I can kind of see the gamer trajectory, community management. We're starting to build on that, but board games. I'm going to make a movie. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, so as I've said, I had no YouTube experience. I had no prior video experience. So it was mainly just the power of understanding communities did have a lot to do with it, because board gamers as a community, like, that's key. And it was also partly because of being a big fan of documentaries in general. And we had seen The King of Kong, and that just blew my mind. Like, that changed everything for me, just realizing that there were documentaries out there about, like, these little pop culture niche topics. Because I'd before that been all about, like Ken Burns, like Civil War documentaries and whatever. I hadn't thought about that medium in terms of covering that kind of thing, like our kind of thing, like things that are current. So there are so many great ones out there. So I got into that. And my husband was playing the board games, and I just said, there should be a documentary about board games. And then just one night we're hanging out, and I was just like, well, I guess I could make one maybe, because one of our friends was an editor at a board game website. So like I said, it's all about the networking. We then had a connection into the community, someone who had insights into what were the important parts of that story and what were the important topics to cover. Like, in board gaming, Essen is the biggest board gaming convention. It's in Germany. It's like the biggest one in the world. I didn't even know about that when I started filming. You find these things out, and it's like, now in hindsight, like, obviously you had to cover that. That's like core to the, whole thing. But I had no idea. I didn't know why they called them German style games necessarily at the time. So you learn this stuff as you go, but it really, really helps not just to have a mentor, but once you have some way into the community, that's key. And community is going to always be happy to talk to you about what they're passionate about. So securing the interviews, that was never a problem. Even up to, I got the designer of the Settlers of Catan. It was not actually difficult to do that, because I had built the personal brand, and I reached out to the right people. And part of it's luck, right? Because I got a write-up on Wired's for Geek Dad's blog, like early on in the process. Like, I got a write-up about that. I used that and said, I'm working on this project. You can learn more, on Wired's blog. I definitely mentioned the Wired part,
right.
When I was talking to these bigger name designers, and that just gets your foot right in the door, and they're like, okay, well, you're serious. And part of it's, you really have to show that you're serious.
Right. Like, let's focus on that a little bit, because it's, I get contacted maybe once a week, or, in that kind of range, about how do you get your guests on the show, and how do you reach out to all of these people, and how, it really isn't as complicated as you'd think. My kind of stock answer is I email them, or I tweet to them, and I ask. But I kind of want to focus a little bit on that level of professionalism, because, when I started the Gaming Careers podcast, I started with 6 contacts that I had, or I kind of generated by sending a lot of emails. Then that 6 I could point to when I was looking for future guests, and I could say, look, this is the type of show I run. This is how organized I am. I launch every Wednesday at this time. And then the professionalism piece came into it. And that really does kind of separate you from Uber fanboy into, I actually take that seriously. So can you tell us about how that experience worked for you with Going Cardboard?
Yeah, that's so true. It's just about getting your foot in the door and then building on what you're doing. Because the other thing I did when I first did my first round of interviews at a local convention that I was doing was I cut a little B-roll kind of music video out of it, just kind of as a tribute to them and their convention, because it really was, I was grateful that they'd hosted me and taken the time to talk with me and, done all that. But also because then I've got a piece of video out there, and it was actually the very first thing ever far as video editing, but it worked out. Like, I mean, I don't know, like lock and whatever, it worked out. It looked decent. And then, like you said, you're building basically a portfolio and you have those things to point to. So when I go to the next person, I'm like, oh, and as you build, it was kind of like I got into that convention by saying, oh, I'm working on this board game documentary. I'm working with Eric Martin. He's, the editor on Board Game News. Like, him. Like, so we're kind of, and that gets you a little kind of credibility out the door. But I didn't start by going after, the big developers. You don't do that. And you're right about the professionalism, and that's where having a marketing background, I think, also came in handy. And it really, really does. And so that's one thing that, not to jump ahead to the bag of tricks thing, but there's this website. It's not really a website. You sign up for this digest email newsletter thing. It's called Who's Blogging What? And it doesn't really tell you much with the title, but it is absolutely everything about the inbound marketing industry, about like email marketing, social media. It's amazing. And they do these little write-ups. Like they did a big write-up about, Google becoming Alphabet and like that whole thing. And they summarize it in really cool ways with hyperlinks to, the different news articles. But that's invaluable, I think, and not just to marketers, but to anybody who kind of, because, if you're not a marketer, you're a marketee. You're receiving that stuff. So I think it's important to know, like, how are they identifying you on Facebook when they target you with ads, things like that. You should know what marketers are doing. And so stuff like that, I think anyone could educate themselves to be kind of a marketer. And when you're building your personal brand, you're marketing yourself. And we all need to be as, good as we can at that. As much as it seems cheesy sometimes, like it seems incredibly like absorbed and kind of like stupid to be like, oh, I'm working on my personal brand. Here's my blog where I'm talking like all intelligently about stuff. But, you have to do it. And you're like, wow, is anybody really listening that I'm tweeting like, at these prescribed like, once an hour times? And like, does anyone really care? And it feels sometimes a little like futile, but it is important in the long run and people will notice and people do care. So
right. And I come back to this, and this is usually a weird conversation, usually 2 or 3 sessions into either career counseling or how to get a job, working on resumes, is, last era was industrial age. So we have these big companies and it's all about the company. We in the information age are these little packets of super specialized expertise and personality and quirks. And so really building your personal brand, regardless of if you're indie or if you're aspiring to join a AAA studio, be an entrepreneur, any of that still needs your website. This is what I'm good at. These are my projects. This is who I am in the space. Because it is, I've explained this, and this did not go over very well, but there really is no longer long-term employment. There is a series of independent contractors and entrepreneurs that agree to get together with each other for a common goal for a period of time. And so if it's 2 years, 3 years, whatever, we're going to enjoy our partnership. And then hopefully that company helps equip you to get to the next place and you help them get to their next milestone. And that is a handshake agreement. And then you move on. The 30-year at one place and that's what you do is really a dying thing. I hope that that's not irritating any of our listeners.
No, you're 100% right. That's absolutely true. And I think it's healthy to look at it that way. Not just so you don't get caught flat-footed if you happen to get laid off, but also for your own advancement. Because the best way to make like big career hops or get into something really, exciting and new is to switch companies. We're all freelancers now. I really do believe that. I agree.
Yep. Absolutely. And so the other thing that I kind of want to dovetail on what we've been talking about is the application of expertise when you don't have it. And so let's talk about that with Going Cardboard. You decided to make a documentary. You didn't have a background in film, and you decided to do this. And now it's part of your portfolio. It lives on your LinkedIn. It is part of your branding. So what helped you actually start this? Was it just a whole lot of, I'm going to go try it and make a lot of mistakes? Or like, how did you start that process of learning something new to make a project?
Well, first of all, like I was really lucky in that that guy that I contacted that had made documentaries before, Jason Scott, was
Mm-hmm.
very encouraging and just didn't start talking about in terms of, if you make this documentary, but he started talking about it like, so here's what you're going to do for your first step in the documentary you're making. So just having a mentor talk to you in those terms really crushes a whole lot of the, oh, maybe I'll do this, and a lot of the wiggle room that you give yourself to get out of doing something that's uncomfortable. So he did that. And then I, did what people do, I guess, at the time. I went to Barnes and Noble and I just like looked in the sections of like, and I found this guerrilla filmmaking book by this guy Anthony Artis, and it looked like just the kind of thing, and it had the right tone. I was just like, this is all about hustle. It's all about you can do anything, like just get out there. It was called Shut Up and Shoot, I think.
Nice.
And
very nice.
So I had started a blog because that's what we do, about the project, like early on, partly again to hold myself accountable. If people are looking and are aware that you're doing a project, again, it's harder to weasel out of it. So I was writing this blog about it, and I mentioned his book, and I linked to it, and I said, yeah, like this guy's got some really good advice, although like I don't think I'm going to be able to get his awesome equipment that he's talking about in this book and whatever. That author, who was a teacher at NYU Film School, emailed me and said, hey, I saw that you wrote about my, book. Like, thank you very much. And if there's anything I can do to help you, like, let me know. And he became my second mentor, like, immediately. So again, like right there, like that's why you have a blog. That's why you're like talking about what you're doing, right? Because you don't know who's out there and willing to help. And people love helping other people, like especially, he's an educator. Like he wants to see that happen. So I wound up like going on his podcast, like, and he mentioned me and his stuff. And when I finally got to the point after the Kickstarter of sending out the actual DVD, which was like an awesome thing, like he put a picture like of himself like holding his copy like and smiling or whatever. That is like one of my fondest moments, because it was just so rewarding to have somebody reach out and help you and cross the finish line with you like that. So, I guess I don't know how much that answers the question exactly, but I learned as I went, but I had 2 very, very good books and 2 very, very good mentors.
That's fantastic. And it actually answers the question kind of right in pocket, because one of the things that you have to pay attention to when you're starting a new project, and this is what I hear over and over and over, both in my personal life and hearing it from successful people, is pay attention to your self-talk. You will give yourself all sorts of reasons why you can't do it. Everybody that you talk to is an expert in why it's not possible for you at this time in your phase of life, ww's it's not possible. That's
absolutely true. Even people I interviewed, they were like, I've thought about making a documentary like this before, but I just don't think it'll work. And I'm there, and they would say things like, well, what happens if you don't finish it? And it would boggle me. I'm like, what do you mean if I don't finish it? Like, of course I'm going to finish it, but you're right. There will be negative talk, not on purpose, but people are just like that. Sometimes.
Yeah, so there's one thing that you mentioned in there, and I'd like to add another to kind of get past that. And actually you mentioned both of them. The first of which is find mentors, and that is part of the accountability process. So find somebody that you are going to tell your drama to that you're aspiring, even if it's one directional. So email or tweet or like the blog, like you're starting to put out there your intentions to accomplish something. And if the mentor responds, more the better. So mentors are a great key. The other thing that is a component of that, and this is something that I use a lot personally, is you have to obligate yourself to be successful. So here's a little secret. I do an hour-ish long interview podcast show per week. That is a crazy amount of work each week in order to put it out.
It is.
I'm not passionate about all of the hours that I go and do the editing and do this, but I have an obligation to my audience. I have this thing in my brain. I start to get the feedback. I'm obligated to put a show out at this time. And I just committed to do that. And I have I think I've mentioned this on the show before. I have a timer on my clock or on my phone. Timer on my clock. That's great. Timer on my phone. That's right. That times down from 2 years. So I'm not allowed to quit. I'm not even allowed to evaluate what I'm doing until I have counted down 2 years. And next month I will be into year 1. And looking back, I now have 50 some odd interviews recorded and out. And I just can't tell you about the number of connections that I've had the opportunity and great pleasure to have now as a result of that. And that's from just putting it out there, obligating yourself. I have a number of mentors that give me crap about what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. And so now, believe it or not, it's much harder for me to conceive of failure or how it couldn't happen. It's just, what's the next thing? And that's a really good feeling to be at.
I love that 2-year idea. I love that. I'm definitely stealing that because, I need to do some next thing. But you're right. It's holding yourself accountable, and that does that. You need a roadmap, for yourself, because otherwise the days go by. And now because you had that obligation thing, before you know it, you look back and you have a profile, you have a catalog of things that you've done, and that's just really cool. I think it'll outlive you too.
And this is just specific to our audience. The 2-year thing is really because of how long it takes to generate a footprint online. Yes. You have to generate that. You're whether it's a blog. I committed to producing 1 piece of content per week for 2 years. And it started off with a blog article. And what I discovered shortly into the process is I suck at writing, and it doesn't blow my hair back. I was still doing it.
Hard.
Oh my gosh, blogging was horrible for me. As everyone has now learned, I am a talkie, not a typey. So the podcast was just, how do I fulfill my obligation of 1 piece of content per week? And yeah, there was a technical hurdle to get over, but it was a much smaller technical hurdle than trying to figure out how my verb tenses should live.
Oh yeah, tell me about it. I'm better at that stuff in Spanish than English. And I suck at Spanish. I'm not saying I know Spanish, but
That's fantastic. So let's kind of focus on how you've kind of built this documentary platform, because you have another documentary. You mentioned it was in pinball.
Yes.
What lessons did you learn from the first documentary that you are applying to fix in the second one?
Well, so first of all, documentary project is a marathon, and I did not know that going into it. I don't know if I would have done it or not, if I'd known what I was in for, but I scoffed at the idea of it being a 4-year process, like the average documentary, but that's pretty much true. I think I did mine in 3, but still, it's a big commitment in your life, and it was a ton of work. And so there was that piece where I'm like, I don't know if I have another in me. I don't know if I can do that again. And then there's the piece of with pinball, this is a more competitive space in the sense of documentaries, because there are already a bunch of pinball documentaries out there. Some are very good, some are whatever, but it doesn't matter. There's a lot of other stuff out there. So to me, it felt like, not that I didn't give my all to the board game documentary, but I had it a little easier because it was the only one. It was the first one, and I don't even know if there's been another full feature-length one since then. So it kind of has the luxury of standing on its own. Now, the pinball space, I didn't have that luxury, so I had been following pinball because I got into pinball obsessively right after board games. Basically, after the documentary was done, we bought a pinball machine. We got into that whole scene. Again, another community that we learned about. So I knew there was a story there, and I felt like, the pinball resurgence, which you're seeing that a bit, in Ars Technica. I think there was an article about how barcades are making a big, comeback, and so they're bringing kind of pinball with them. They're still making new pinball machines. So, and there's a modding scene to it that I had no idea about, prior to joining pinball. So there are a lot of neat little stories. I had a screenplay. I knew, it's a small space, so I knew who I would want to interview if I did a documentary. So I had written all that kind of, but I wasn't ready to do it because I didn't feel like I had the technical abilities to make it look the way I wanted to look. And then in my, just following the hobby, I came across this video. It was called Pinball Love. I forget where it was, on one of the game websites, but it was beautiful. And it was just perfectly shot. It was clear the person who made that film had a love and appreciation for pinball as a kinetic medium. They understood how to shoot pinball as a subject. So I actually emailed that person and I said, I've been thinking there should really be a pinball documentary. You clearly understand the hobby. You should make it. And he emailed back to me and he said, I've actually been thinking about a pinball documentary. We should talk. And the rest is history. Like, that was Blake Fawcett, and I've partnered with him. He's doing the editing and the filming, and I did the kind of screenplay and arranged all the interviews and, have been doing sort of the markety business end of it a little bit. And that's in post-production right now. So, it's about recognizing where you can't do it yourself, because like I said, you can do the whole piece yourself, but it isn't always ideal. That's not always practical. So in my personal situation, I was just like, I don't know if I can do another one all by myself, and I had these reasons. So I found a good partner. So you can always move forward with an idea, even if you can't do it all by yourself.
Right, right. And one of the things that I would suggest when starting a new project is actually find out how much money you have to spend on it. And I would encourage you to spend that money on other people doing it, if at all possible. If you're the person doing it, you're not overseeing it. So if it's your vision, you are the responsible party to make it what you want at the end. And I promise you don't have all of the skills to do that. Even if you're an indie programmer and can do both front end and back end programming, there are so many people that have skills specialized that can help you out at a fraction of what it'll cost you to do it yourself. So, I mean, I've recommended to people that are working on their indie project to keep a day job or get a part-time job so that they can pay for people with the expertise that they want in order to manifest their vision. It's just sticking in your strengths. So
yeah, like I would, even if I had like the most successful Kickstarter ever, I wouldn't quit my day job, in that term. Like I just wouldn't do it.
Right, right. So that actually acts as a great transition into your day job and everything that our listeners are like, okay, we want the secret recipe. Let's transition into that. I've just started. I've just produced my game, and I have a physical copy. When should I start media? Maybe years before?
I would say so, yeah. So, well, and I know hindsight, you can only start from today, like it starts today. But
right.
like one of the things that made my Kickstarter successful was that I had spent 9 to 12 months before that building a community. So either you build the community or you know exactly how to reach the community. Because I mean, in pinball, I know exactly how to reach the community. There's like one big site where everybody goes for the most part, and like it's very easy to find all those people. In board gaming, same thing. There's Board Game Geek, and but still, I built my own community just so I would have.
What is it control. For the pinball? Because I'm not familiar with that one.
Pinside.
Got it. That'll be in the show notes. That's why now it's immortalized.
Yeah, it's an awesome site. It's run by this Dutch guy, and he's really super cool. So they actually have a Dutch localized tab on it, which that's why.
Nice.
But it's a really neat site and a lot of good resources there, a lot of good discussion. And if you go there, you'll see that pinball is definitely alive and well.
All right.
But so yeah, I mean, as far as you build the community, it's best to have a website or at least a Facebook page at the very least. I mean, you have to kind of bite off what you can chew, like maybe you can't program or pay for, in some cases, the website, but you can always do a Facebook page, and you can always start a WordPress blog, whether or not you host it on a website. And I would recommend going with WordPress at this point. Like I started on Blogger when I did the board game one, but that was a long time ago, and definitely WordPress has a lot of great flexibility to it. So I would do that. I have a personal website. It's not up at the moment, but I plan to bring it back up soon because a lot of it was during a job search. I really was, that was what I was building it for. And I'm very happy where I am right now. So I was just like, I can park that for a little while, but plus then that takes all the pressure off having to blog because my blog isn't online. So
right.
I weaseled out is basically what I did. But I'll bring
filled
it back
it with
up.
other activities. I don't know. You only have so much,
I'm doing things. Yeah, that's it. Just can't focus on it at the moment. Yeah, no. But now that I've mentioned it, the onus is on me, so I'll have to go reactivate that and start blogging again. So thanks so much for that.
You're welcome. And to our listeners, go and check it out. And what is it? Lorien.green.com?
Just loriengreen.com. Yeah.
Yeah.
Caveat,
and right now,
it's not there yet, but it will be.
Go and check out the cute cat video that's there right now. until you unpark
cat video, God forbid. No.
There's a cat video that is falling asleep and then is about to fall over, and it's magical, and my heart leapt with joy. Yes.
Then the site has remained fully representative of me, and that's great.
That's wonderful. All right, so we've just created our WordPress blog, and we have the "This is your first post," or like "Hello World," which is I think the first one.
Yes.
How do I start? I have a WordPress blog, but where do you start making an impression? Because I'll just between you, me, and the fence post, nobody else is listening. You start putting content out there, and you just throw all of your love and energy off a cliff, and it just falls, and no one interacts, and it's all quiet, and nobody cares.
And you should expect that that's going to happen. It could happen. Maybe you'll get lucky and it won't, but you frequently have to toil in obscurity for a long time before the time comes, if and when you make it big. You won't always, but so one thing, I don't know if you've heard of HubSpot, but definitely people who are interested in creating their personal brand and blogging and this sort of thing should follow HubSpot. But they put on this convention in Boston every year, and one of the times they did, there was a very famous SEO expert, Rand Fishkin. He was doing the keynote, and he was talking about his wife who had a travel blog. And I think it was 2 years. He showed us the graph of web traffic to that blog. It was 2 years almost flatlined until it spiked like Mount Everest, and I don't remember what made that actually happen, but the point was you don't stop. Traffic at first cannot be your goal. You're building, just kind of a repository. I would say with a blog in the early, months of your blog, when you're first starting out on your blog, just go for the SEO, try to get topics in there discussing, share your expertise, because people will find that. And they find it through, just you frequently using those terms. The Google search engine will start to view you as an authority, and more people, it's a positive feedback loop. Then people start visiting. Google assumes, people are going there. They must be finding what they want. They must be happy. You start ranking higher, and that's just how it works. And it isn't easy. There's no, necessarily, magic thing to do. You have to work at it and keep writing those articles. Obviously, grammar counts. Try to make them as good as you can, and just share your passion. And if your passion shines through, then, eventually, and even if, this is the thing, say nobody ever finds it. Say it winds up being basically your personal diary. You have to be okay with that. You have to be like, this is, I got to share me. And the way I look at it, my blog, it has a couple pages that have ranked pretty well and I'm happy with as a marketer. But even if it didn't, when I'm 90 years old and my grandkids are running around and, they may think that's cool. They may read that. So I feel and that's kind of a weird side motivation for writing a blog. But I mean, if you think about it, you are sharing a piece of yourself with that. So I always look at it as, at the very least, you're doing it for yourself. It helps for you to organize your thoughts. It helps for you to, determine who you are, to kind of shape yourself. So yeah, maybe it'll be in obscurity forever, but never give up on it, because you can always, Rand Fishkin's wife, that could always happen to you. You just don't know.
Absolutely. And so, when I was starting my blog, I did a lot of similar research, and 2 years. That's why I set the bar at 2 years. It's a 2-year flat line, and then stuff happens. That is a fairly typical curve with frequent posts. It's not like you just put it up and then for 2 years later, it all of a sudden is amazing.
Yeah.
So with the SEO, I think that's a great tip. So figuring out topics that you're interested in and making everything that you're writing keyword rich. I've heard a couple of suggestions about trying to do guest posts, and I'd like your feedback on that. Another thing that I would suggest for some practical application things for our listeners is find those articles that inspire you, and you're doing this because you're inspired by something, and write editorial pieces about things, about the authors, about the writers that you are following, and do a great job. This is where, like you said, grammar counts, and then drop them a line and say, hey, I just really like this article. I wrote this derivative piece because I was a big fan, or I had some thoughts to develop on that. And I just want to thank you for your time. Don't ask them to read it. Don't ask them to share it. Just let them know that what they did in their life was valuable to you. And here's a little insider tip. They will want to see how you inspired them. So they're going to go and check out your stuff. And that's kind of the underpinnings behind building that relationship.
So that's a great tip.
Can you tell me about kind of your experience with that and potentially the guest blogging? I haven't had a lot of experience with that.
I haven't done a lot of it. People go back and forth on guest blogging, saying like, oh, you're just promoting the other person and whatever, but it still is on your URL, like your domain. So, and I think going either way on guest blogging, like I wrote basically a case study for another website somewhere, and that other website, if it ranks better than your site, is going to, get your name out there. So guest blogging goes both ways. I'm a fan of it. The other thing too that I had meant to mention, like when you're first starting a blog, is to build yourself a pipeline. Like have some articles there, because especially when you're getting started, like it might be hard for inspiration to strike, but like you said, keeping on that regular schedule is super important. So before you even launch the blog, have like, a little stable of articles, to work from.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Because what happens is you make this scaffolding, which is your freshly installed WordPress blog. Then you go to it, and everything is defaulted. All of your widgets suck, and all of your headers sucks, and then your content, your main content is empty, and it can be depressing just to go there. So I think that's a great tip, to have some stuff already worked up and ready to go, so that when you visit, it's a place that you enjoy being, so that you want to come back.
Yeah, very much so. But yeah, on the guest blogger thing, I'm all for it, and it's one hand washes the other. Like we're sort of everybody, when you get into this building your brand mentality, you don't say no when someone asks if you want to do a guest blog. And, the really big names might say no to you because they're like, oh, well, I don't need you, or it devalues my personal brand to be on a small website like that. But like you said, then you can just do an editorial. You can write about them. And the other thing too is, don't be afraid to have an opinion, like a strong opinion one way or the other when you write on your blog, because people don't necessarily get inspired by, fair and honest, equal critiques. Although it's good to have those. And this is hard for me because I tend to be that way. But if you have a strong opinion about something, positive or negative, people get jazzed up about that kind of thing. And whether they agree with you or disagree with you, it's a great magnet for traffic. So it can get you a lot of, attention. But the way that blogs and social media work together, and especially Twitter, makes this like so much easier because it's public. You don't necessarily have had to build a following for a year for your blog post to get out there. Like I'm following right now #NoManSky, which is this, video game that everybody's waiting for. But if I write a blog article about No Man's Sky and I go to Twitter and say, you put in the title of the blog article and whatever, and a link to it, and you use that hashtag No Man's Sky, anybody who's interested in No Man's Sky will go to that article. So, and also like keyword wise, they'll find it on Google and stuff, because we all have Google alerts for that, because, it's kind of like Fallout 4 for some people.
That's right. You mentioned the social media aspect of it. It sounds that so writing a blog post is slower, a lot more time invested, a lot more kind of research. And this is all designed to kind of pull people to you. That's that inbound marketing piece.
Mm-hmm.
I always get the impression that Facebook posts and Twitter is more outbound. Like let me project my message out there. How do you make it an effective inbound tool to build your personal brand?
So what inbound basically means is just the opposite of like advertising marketing. And so in a sense, you're right. Like Twitter, it is sort of like you're advertising yourself because you're putting your stuff out there. But inbound marketing is also about people finding you at the time that they find you because you have what they're looking for at the time they need it. So as opposed to, you're watching the Super Bowl and an ad for, a car comes on. You may or may not be in any way, shape, or form in the market for a car right then. That's the old style of marketing. Whereas if I want a new refrigerator and I'm Googling refrigerator model comparisons, that's inbound marketing, because anything I find then, if I was a smart refrigerator company, I would obviously have a lot of content that I expect people would, who are looking for refrigerators would find. That's inbound marketing. So like I said, with the hashtags in Twitter is kind of key for that. It's all about keywords, inbound marketing. So Twitter hashtags are kind of like keywords. And I mean, Facebook too, to a lesser degree. People don't really use Facebook hashtags that much, but I mean, they're there. So a hashtag is basically you branding a particular thing. In that, they will look for that keyword. I mean, Twitter is amazing for that. And if you're not familiar with Twitter, like, you should get into it just for that. Even you don't even necessarily need a Twitter account to do that. You can just like go into Twitter and search for something and you get all the latest everything about it. So in a way, it's a search engine of sorts. So in that sense, it's inbound marketing in that sense. It's not the advertising so much. And plus, you get followers on Twitter, so you're building your own community. So it's a combination of people who are following you and people who might be following those hashtags or those keywords, because you can also search Twitter for non-hashtagged keywords, just things that you're interested in. So in that sense, you should think of it a lot more like a Google or a YouTube.
Okay. That's really interesting. So maybe we can talk about some specific suggestions to use Twitter in order to kind of build. It's one of my primary medium that I pursue, and so what can you suggest by way of finding keywords that relate to your brand? How do you link your brand to whatever it is, whatever hashtag you're following, so that hopefully you can get some bleed over? What are some tips that you can recommend there?
Oh, I will give you all the insider tips. I'm about to tell you like my biggest secret weapons here. So with hashtags, hashtagify.me.
Okay.
That you just type in like say I want a hashtag for like education, like if I was writing in that space. So I would do in their little search box at hashtagify.me, I would write hashtag education. So then this like cool visual sort of map of bubbles comes up, and it shows you all the hashtags related to that people tend to use, and it shows you a big sidebar with all the recent tweets who use that hashtag, so you can see first off if your hashtag is correct for the industry you're looking at. Like for example, in my day-to-day job, LMS is a learning management system, so you might think hashtag LMS would be a good thing to do, and it is, but when I look on Hashtagify Me, I find that hashtag LMS also has a completely different meaning of like my status. And so, that's utterly useless to me. And maybe in some cases, it's better for me to tag something with like HR as a hashtag instead of, LMS, because LMS can be taken so many different ways. Like if you're too generic with a hashtag, you'll run into that. So Hashtagify Me is a really good way to find out if there's maybe a more specific hashtag that better sums up what it is you're trying to talk about.
Very
so that's
nice.
A good one.
And so like I can see a situation where I would look for what I'm interested in or what I'm producing, whether it's a tabletop game, indie game, something like that, and try to find a very specific genre or set of words around that, and then produce some sort of content or commentary or something, and then use that hashtag, and then maybe include my hashtag. Or should I have my own hashtag, or will people just follow me from the at my domain or at my, how do you connect the two?
Typically they'll just follow you. The golden rule, like the sweet spot for hashtags, is 2 hashtags. Not 1, not 3, but 2, for whatever reason. So you do want to pick out 2 if you can, but the construction of a tweet really is kind of an art. So like if it's too blue, and this is going to sound weird, but like if there's too much linky stuff in it, it looks a little overwhelming and less aesthetically pleasing, and I do feel that has an impact. So, and also images, attach an image to your tweets whenever you can, because it gives you so much more real estate, like triple the real estate for your particular tweet. So you show up in the feeds a lot more, and the same goes for Facebook. Like that's a big deal on Facebook. But yeah, so carefully constructing your tweets and getting a feel, and you'll get a feel for what makes a good tweet just by looking at a bunch of tweets yourself and kind of keeping an eye out for what you're enticed to click, like what feels like a good tweet to you. So there's a big deal of that, but I usually just try to hashtag a couple things, and I don't always use hashtags in a tweet. Like if it's not called for, I don't squeeze them in there just for the sake of putting them in there. But when it's pertinent to the audience, and it's really smart to hashtag parts of the title versus like repeating the same word at the end of the tweet and in a hashtagged form. Like if I had a blog that said, like 10 tips for learning, instructors, and then I hashtagged it learning at the end, that's just like way not the way to go. You just want to hashtag the learning in your title. And I see that all the time, or I wouldn't even mention it, like that people do that. And it's like one of my little pet peeves. I'm like, because it's space is such a commodity on a tweet. I'm like, you're wasting like all this space. And the other thing too is try to keep your tweets to 120 characters instead of 140. A lot of people don't do that, and it's less of a problem now that there are all these different ways to retweet. But when somebody goes to retweet your stuff, in some places it'll pop into the window, and if your handle plus the RT plus the message is now more than 140 characters, they can't retweet it. So nice. Making it 120 gives you that extra little bit of space, so that it's very easy and convenient for the person to retweet you, because you want to obviously make it easy. So those are some Twitter techniques. There's another site that I don't use much but has a ton of potential that I've been meaning to play with, which is BuzzSumo, which is BuzzSumo. You can use it in conjunction with #IfIMe. They work pretty well together, because BuzzSumo just kind of tells you like trending topics. And if you like look up education in BuzzSumo, for example, I don't know why I keep using education. I'm a gamer, but
very nice.
But like it would tell you like trending topics and things like that you might want to get in on. So those are two very useful websites, and they're free, right? And Hootsuite's the other one. Like, my God, like if you're not on Hootsuite, like get on Hootsuite.
What is
amazing. Hootsuite sort of lets you manage your social media presence, and it's just HOOTSUITE. And I think the free version lets you have 3 tabs. So you could have like a Facebook, a LinkedIn, and a Twitter, and you wouldn't even have to pay for it. I do like the $10 a month thing because it's totally worth it for me. But Hootsuite will let you create these streams where, I have a stream for No Man's Sky. I have a stream for gaming. I have a list where I have like, all the big websites. And so all their updates just stream there. It's very easy for me to quickly look at that and find out stuff that I can retweet or share or comment on, that kind of thing. But Hootsuite also lets you schedule things in advance. It has this really cool new publisher tool for suggestions where you put in 3 keywords and it gives you a whole bunch of tweets that you can just schedule into your Twitter feed. So it automates a lot of it.
I haven't
It's really super cool.
I use a bunch of other apps to try to find feed stuff for my Twitter. So if Hootsuite has already incorporated that, that'll save me a bunch of time. So I'm gonna have to go back and open my
they just kicked it out of beta not too long ago. It's really, really good. I love it. Like, it's super good.
Fantastic. So what it sounds like is that there is so much to learn as far as social media and inbound marketing. If somebody doesn't have that skill set or doesn't want to learn that skill set, do you have any suggestions for how they might outsource that or partner with somebody, or how do they still make their product known if they're not going to sit down and learn 15 pieces of new software to start encouraging people to come visit them?
Right, that's a good point. And the other thing with social is it's really easy, again, to bite off more than you can chew because you feel like you have to be everywhere. Like, oh, there's Instagram. Oh, I really should open an account there. Like, oh, Google Plus, and Twitter and Facebook. I guess I need all those. And like, you really don't. And if you do open up a lot and it's just you and you're only willing to dedicate, say 10 minutes of your day every day to it, you can't manage all those channels. So I would say if someone doesn't really feel like they want to get that into the weeds, because obviously like it's my day job. I'm obsessed with it. Hootsuite and all that stuff. That's because I live and breathe it. You don't have to do that. It's only if you really want to get like, ooh, I like keywords. I like being discovered in like SEO and I really want to get into the strategery of it. That's great. If you don't, you can still do just fine. It's all about how competitive you want to be about it. So you could just have your Facebook page, put updates to it when you can, but I hesitate to say find somebody to volunteer and do it for you because I'm always really, I don't think that's a good strategy. I mean, if you can pay someone to do it, that's one thing, and that can be good to do. But even then, that person isn't you, and they don't know your business, and they can get pretty good at it, but that doesn't mean they know how you'll react to, XYZ thing. And the real thing you bring to the table as a thought leader or, your personal brand, it's you. It's all about you. So as much as I am automating some stuff, and sometimes I'll schedule a tweet for a retweet without actually going through and reading the article because I just don't have time. But I know by the title, I'm like, oh yeah, I totally dig this stuff. So I'll just do it, and I know it'll still provide value to my followers. So you don't have to necessarily. I wouldn't recommend outsourcing that part if you can help it. If you have to, then you have to, and you can still have a presence online then. But like we pointed out, the blogging stuff, it's not trivial. It is a chunk of your time, and I don't really know any way around that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this started 50 episodes ago. I was looking for the secret sauce. What's the recipe that you can use in order just to be hugely successful? And there just isn't one. You have to do the work.
Yeah.
And I've had some experience myself with outsourcing my social media. And it comes back to exactly what you were saying. It's you, like you are your personal brand, and you can't really outsource you. And the people that I was working with were very professional, and they did a great job in the most part. But then the flavor was wrong, or the audience that I would have talked to is wrong. They went out and found something. And so there's this lot of course correction, and it regardless of the amount of work or however good they got at it, they weren't me. And so there was always this kind of stiffness to the communication that wasn't me. And I had an interview recently where I got a great little soundbite where you're looking for names, not numbers. Especially in the gaming community, you're looking for actions, right? Your call to action. How many people are actually invested into what you have to say, versus how high of ranking do you have as far as a Twitter following? Well, it's great if you have 10,000 followers, but if no one ever interacts with what you say, then your following really isn't that large potentially. So if you can,
quality over quantity.
Absolutely, especially in the gaming market, indies, absolutely, tabletop, absolutely, and then you mentioned it earlier, the AAA space, they're going to have a department, they're going to pay for it, and they're going to pay well.
Yeah, that is true. That is very, very true. And we'd all like to be PewDiePie in hindsight, but it's not all about numbers. And first of all, like, that was just lightning in a bottle. You can't do that now. It's sort of like a lot of the stuff that I got away with, the ways that I did my documentary have changed. Like, even like on Kickstarter, there weren't even stretch goals at that point. Like, that hadn't even been a thing yet. So, like, if I'd have been able to leverage that, I probably would have done even better on the Kickstarter. But times change so fast. You can't be like looking back and trying to emulate somebody else. Like, you have to do like what you're passionate about and look for the next big thing that somebody's not doing, and like solve a problem that someone hasn't solved. Like, we're all jealous of that, but at this point, if you were starting from ground zero, I don't even know how I would begin to try to match that. Like, it doesn't happen. Maybe it does, I don't know, but not by me.
Well, it just, so this is one of those great episodes where I'm kind of learning how true that secret sauce is elusive. You can't kind of codify it into a list of steps. What I think you can do is codify the behaviors that you can practice in order to find whatever your recipe is. Start, do something, be periodic, find mentors, pay attention to your self-talk, and just start producing. It's going to be crap. Just put it out. Lorien, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate all of your time and insight. What I'd like is if you have any resources that are your go-to resources for either motivation or social media inbound marketing that we haven't talked about, please share those, and where we can find out more about you and what's going on in your world.
So right now, like, probably the best place to find me is on Twitter. I'm totally active there, and you'll see the fruits of my Hootsuite labor there. But it's just Lorien Green, like at Lorien Green on Twitter. Like I said, I promise I'll get that website up again soon. And then you'll be able to find me on my blog. That would have been my go-to answer, and now I'm like, oh yeah, that was not a good idea to park that, so I'll put it back up. But as far as like places I go to for inspiration, like I said, human workplace, whether or not you're job seeking, I just really love her attitude. I really love it's inspirational to me. She's very much about that building your own brand, and you're a freelancer, and what you do as yourself has value. I think you would love her, and I think your listeners would too. Some people don't. Some people are just like, her advice is only newbie advice and whatever, but it's worked for me. And like I said, Who's Blogging What is a great resource just to follow, to get your feet wet, get a feel for what's going on in the industry, because it is fast paced. And I was thinking about that, earlier today, just like what are some of like the sort of holistic like views if you're new to it. Business to community is another one I use a lot. But again, that really depends on how in the weeds you want to get. It can be technical and so forth. But Who's Blogging What, I feel like, is very entertaining and at the same time provides a lot of depth. So for career and for figuring out marketing and your own brand, and also HubSpot. HubSpot's fun and hip and cool. And, obviously you're not going to become like an enterprise level account with them. So like the reason they're content marketing is basically to snag those kind of things, but you can hugely benefit from it just by following them. They have great advice. They have awesome advice about just silly things to do, as far as blog titles and things like, top 10 lists are a valuable thing to do, and to your point, things about guest blogging, they have good advice for that. So they have great advice for a lot of this stuff at the level that I think, somebody who's more an indie developer just trying to cover their bases on this could really benefit from. So I would go Human Workplace, HubSpot, and definitely, Who's Blogging What. Those would be my three go-tos, I think, for those things. For inspirational, oh my God, like, I don't know. I'm just all over the web on that stuff. Like, I love the Prince E stuff. I always listen to his stuff. Even though he says, like, unplug from social media, it's terrible. I'm like, oh.
Well, that's my job.
Yeah.
Lorien, this has been fantastic. Thank you again for your time. Just a great conversation. I think there's a lot of really good things, practical application stuff that our listeners can pull from this. And I really hope to have you on the show again and learn more tips and tricks.
I would be happy to come on anytime. Thank you so much for having me. And it's been inspiring.
Oh, I thank you. We'll talk again soon.
All right.